hear me, trying to interrupt you.
She's just on a roll.
Yes, but I don't stop.
No, that's all right. Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm trying to let you go, but sometimes I have an idea, then you'll bring in another interesting idea, and I'll forget the previous one, like I'm doing now, but I think I just remembered it. I don't know if you heard a couple months ago, the Everine said there are 600-year cycles. That's the basic cycle in the universe, 600 years. Well, the Templars were wiped out in 1307, and 600 years later, it comes up to 1907, 1908, 9, 10. That's when Wyndham Lewis comes back to London. But it's now 100 years after that. But I'm saying the 600-year cycle is from the massacre of the Templars on Friday the 13th, and then you have the Paris thing. And it is an operation happening in Paris in 1307. You know, it's the same country. So maybe the 600-year cycle is applicable here to your pattern, Roxy, because it may not be actually 1307. Ian says our calendars are all screwed up and not accurate at all. So it may be actually 600 years from a couple of weeks ago and back 600 years to whenever that was in the 1300s or 1200s approximately, whatever it was. Could have been more precisely than the numbers indicate. You know, 1307 and 2007 is 700 years. Anyways, it's interesting. It's 600-year point.
And also the President Hollande, there was like an homage to the victims of the attacks. And he said, La musique est insupportable aux terroristes. The music is insupportable to the terrorists, and they make a big deal that they attacked their culture, and this concert hall that is 200 years old. So
what did you?
I found it.
Did you say? You're saying
the music
is terrorism? Is that what you? Is that what he said? Music is terrorism? I don't think he said that. But no, what? I didn't get what you said.
Cannot stand the music. It's
terrorists cannot stand the music.
Yeah, that it's like it's an attack on the culture, on the music.
Of music? Are you saying on music?
Yes, he said that, like they're attacking the values of the encyclopedias, the Enlightenment, and they make.
Okay, well, here's something that's not said. That guy, you know, the guy, one of the terrorists, and his girlfriend was the one that they blew up a couple days later. There's the young kids. How about the fact that those fucking guys were on Prozac? We say American snipers. Listen to this, Carol. American snipers, American high school terrorists are on Prozac and drugs like that. What if these guys were on Prozac? No one ever would think of that. They just think they're just a manic bunch of barbarians from another world. But maybe they're on meds, and they didn't take their meds that day, and they went nuts. What do you think of that?
No, they're on religious drugs.
Well, there was an article in the German press that
maybe combination.
They are on a drug called Captagon. It's amphetamine.
Oh, and, so they did name a drug. They did name a drug.
Yes, they use it in combat. To be able to
become braver.
To be braver and to have the energy to combat for longer periods, and they're in this state of aggression, very excited.
Right. Like speed.
It's called Captagon.
Right, but it's like speed in the 60s. Musicians would take speed to be touring. So, Carol, is that one with fluoride in it? Do you know how
No, it is an amphetamine, but also a theophylline, which is sort of pumps up the lungs. So it's a double drug, and who knows what a double drug will do, but no fluoride in it, but it's still pretty stimulating.
And dangerous?
Huh?
Would you say dangerous? Would you give it to somebody?
Well, you know, a lot of women used to take amphetamine speed to lose weight. You know, it makes you very hyper. So, that's interesting that
there was a medical aspect to it.
Right.
And they showed this guy, he said he stood around and watched, and then he went back to Afghanistan or went someplace, and then he came back in. But I think later, he got killed, right? He eventually got caught?
No, they're still looking for him now. They're still looking for him.
The main one they show with the long name,
yes.
You know, many A's and B's in it. They haven't got him, eh?
No, they're still looking for him.
Right. And the woman who got blown up was his wife or girlfriend or something. Did you know that?
Yes, that's what they're claiming.
Yeah.
But
even in Wiki, sorry, Bert. Even in Wiki, they talk about this drug, Captagon, as being a drug playing a central role in the Syrian civil war.
In Syria?
It's made in Syria, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So this is well known in Berlin journalism, right? You read this several times, Roxy?
It's everywhere. And
so there, even to be a successful terrorist, you got to be on medication.
It's a prerequisite.
Yeah, it's a tough profession. You know, it's can't be healthy.
That's what expanded definition of what is an artist by McLuhan. He said the artist has to bring balance into this new situation that causes discomfort, because they are the only ones that can see before everybody else what's coming. And with the work of art, people start to see and understand, and it sort of changes the sensibility of the group. And it's a type of medicine, like a type of massage.
A type of what? Massage and medicine. Yeah.
Massage.
Yeah.
The new
it's
food,
Reiki. Yeah.
the knowledge, the science.
You look at a book of Finnegan's Wake, and it's exactly what Marshall says. The artist is aware of new changes in our sensory ratios long before anybody else does, because they're tuning in, at least semi-consciously, into the effects of the new environment. Back when he's writing, in the 20s and 30s, he's writing Finnegan's Wake, which looks like a chaotic book. But it wasn't even a book. He was showing digital culture, the world of Instagram and email and instant communication, which would show up 100 years later. He actually painted what was coming. I mean, that's a pretty amazing technical achievement, that someone to paint the future. I mean, and the book can only be understood now. Zappa in music is somebody that they didn't know what he was doing. And he was expressing the present hypertactility and maybe ion. He's predicting the ionic. Now, Roxy posted this incredible video I'd never seen before of Zappa conducting in Paris in December 15th, 1970, and showing his technique real close up. It's really good footage. It's on your fellow musician on the stage watching Frank direct you, and the way he moves his hands around. So I coined this phrase inspired by Frank, hand signals for the blind. I made a play called Hand Signals for the Blind in the early 80s, and I had the play. It was sort of like discussing the different, what I call holy offices, McLuhan, Beater, everybody, and at the end of it, the punchline is Zappa gets recognized as the most relevant present-day holy office. So I give the Oscar to Zappa, and as I read these screenplays, it's justified. One main point is that he's using an instrument, the electric guitar, consciously as a composing tool, but he's using an instrument that is the instrument of the day. If you want to get to the masses, you got to use what they can do and what they are into. And McLuhan couldn't play the guitar. LaRouche doesn't play the guitar. That's the advantage Frank has. He's right there in the present, the invisible present, and sculpting it with his guitar abilities. And he's pretty well the best guitarist that we've ever heard. Not everybody agrees with that statement because they have different ideas of what a guitarist would do, but the fact that Zappa doesn't rehearse, doesn't play and practice, and then every couple of years goes out and then does this incredible guitar, which is based on talking in the moment conversationally. That's how he's playing. He's doing guitar as conversation. So he didn't have to rehearse musical technique because he was going to have to play what he's talking in his mind. That's why he wouldn't rehearse it, right? He has to talk it. It's like right now, I don't know what I'm going to say next, but based on what you say, that'll evoke something. So the environment of the concert, of the audience in a particular day, determined the kind of conversation Frank was going to do through his music, through his guitar.
Improvisation.
So that's
improvisation.
And referring back to programmed, pre-planned stuff. He was juggling both. You know, the signals that the guys followed orders on certain parts, and then there was other areas where they could improvise. But he didn't favor one or the other.
Yes, and I was listening to one of, remember the name, I never remember names, but he was saying part of the job of being in Mothers of Inventions is that you have to entertain Zappa. And he will promote any type of idea that you will have to make the performance entertaining. But they had to entertain the conductor. Actually, they were not really thinking about the audience. And he said, when you have a silence, you have to come up with something because he will not allow you to just stand there and count the bars you are not going to play. You have to do something. You have to make something funny, act, dance, do some movement, whatever, and then be there on time and do what you have to do. And also be there if he makes a sign or something and you have to perform a solo or whatever. And I found that very interesting. And another thing he said is he would also like this part of this type of entertainment. They had to make quotes of things they knew from their classical, jazz, or from pop. Or, they had to make quotes and insert them as jokes, as very sophisticated types of jokes.
Right.
And Frank will recognize, for example, he's playing Holst or Stravinsky, and he will find that very funny, that they were putting all these quotes, like you say, they're speaking, and they're quoting. It's now, part of the
what
conversation.
Interview? I've never seen that said. What interview is that in? Where'd you read that? Or did he say it on the recording?
There is a documentary called Freak Out.
Oh, yeah. And that's in there, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, I think it's in there.
Yeah, I mean, he's training them to be comprehensive like himself. And this is what Carolyn Guertin talks about, the remix culture. They must remix what they know and apply it in a new situation, or the cultural references that they can make fun of or supplement or praise. I mean, he was turning them into mini Zappas. That's what he was doing.
Yes, and for example, there is this cadence, it's called the Alleluia cadence, that is used for religious music, for ending, like to say Alleluia. And he will allow this type of formulas only as jokes. You know, like, okay, you're doing this formula, but it's a joke. But he will not allow the musicians to just use these formulas to play. They have to go beyond, explore possibilities of their instruments. In all ways, in the melody, in the rhythm, in the sound textures, what they could produce. And
was this particular to the? Was this particular only, Roxana? Was this particular only to the Mother's Invention or all of Frank's bands, which you were describing?
All the bands.
Earlier? All the bands. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's high quality training.
Maybe not so. The Mother's Invention, he eventually dropped them because they weren't skillful enough to do the new demands that the 70s were bringing in. That's part of the reason he broke them up, is that he had new complexities and they couldn't read music and they weren't as good as the later musicians that came. and so I don't know if he demanded the mothers. There's some of it. I mean, he did have Roy Estrada do doo-wop. He was a doo-wop singer, so he'd make fun of that. But as he got more and more amazing musicians, he could draw on their training, on their background. I mean, the first guys in the mothers were working-class guys who didn't have much education, just were good singers and musicians, Jimmy Carl Black and Roy Estrada. So they had no musical training, but they had the pop culture down of the world that Frank came out of, doo-wop and R&B. So they could play off and improvise on that. But once Frank got better instruments and more complex compositions, he required more training in his musicians. And the other thing was,
he liked music, all types of music, and he was not into, this is classic, this is jazz, this is this, and this is that.
Right.
He liked any type of music, I think.
Well, I just read where he explains he saw the R&B guys when he was young having great fun. He saw some classical musicians having great fun, and so he said, what's the difference? The key is to have fun. If you're having fun, then you're a valid creation, and not some boring dogmatic thing. So the classical guys were equal to the R&B as long as they were having fun. There was another point. Oh, yeah, here's something that people don't know, is that another factor that got musicians in the band is their name. Frank had a neighbor in Lancaster when he was in high school named Denny Wally. And Denny Wally was a musician, so he knew Frank since they were teens. But it wasn't until many years later that Denny Wally got to play in Frank's band. But one reason he would get in there, the subliminal puppetry that Frank was doing, is that he wanted to make fun of David Wally, who wrote the first book on Zappa and had a falling out with Frank. So Denny Wally gets in the band because it evokes the whole drama with David Wally. All right? Same last name. The sergeant, the cop in Cucamonga that busted Frank for that fake bullshit porno tape was a guy named Sergeant Willis. Well, that's why Ike Willis got in the band.
Wow.
Isn't that incredible? And there's a couple other examples I don't have right in my mind. That's what he was doing. In other words, it's like Finneg's Wake. There's a lot of biographical stuff in Finneg's Wake, but you have to really know Joyce's life to find it and see it. But it's only one level. It's like having your chemical body in there. And then you have your TV body, which would be making fun of musical fads like the Beatles. And then you have your chip body, which would be this digital tactility of hyper or whatever, maybe electronic stuff. The different bodies are in Frank's work as they are in Finneg's Wake. And so the story of Frank's life and his own synchronicity in his life of names showing up again would be a pattern that he would include. And you would have an advantage over someone else if you had a name that Frank had already encountered in his life.
It's like these, the things at the end of the movies or TV programs. If somebody... It's similar to a real person. It's just a coincidence.
Right. What about at the end of the movie? You mean the credits?
Sometimes they put this sign, like any similarity to a real-life character is a coincidence.
Yeah, I don't think Frank says that at the end of his movies. There's lots of similarities to real and living people that he intends.
So it's like Frank...
playing with that.
Yeah.
It's like each song, each album was like a collage.
Okay, first of all, what are you saying, Roxy?
Sorry. No, I just said he liked to play with that, like in 200 Motels, the band is his band, and Ringo is Zappa.
Yes, Ringo, that's right. And then what were you saying, Bert?
I would say it seems like what you just laid in there that about Wally and Willis, is that it's almost like his song, each album, or each part was like a collage of so many different elements that he wanted to project onto the audience or anyone.
It's a collage of levels. It's a collage of levels. which can reference to multisensory, synesthesia, to technical environments, to sociological patterns, countries, like Lewis in this book, Tar, came out in like 1918. The characters represent countries, and he was showing how World War I happened by the clash of the Russian and the French and the German and the British. And so he would show that clash among the artists in this novel, and the artist is set before World War I, right? So each person, each character represented a corporate entity, a nation, a tribe. So that's part of modernism.
He really was a general, a strategic. He's very strategic. I mean, just to put that little quirk on someone who wrote a bad article about him to inviting the guy into the band is just like a left hook, you know. Ah, there you go.
Yeah. Like Frank had incredibly talented people auditioning to be in his band. All kinds of people wanted to play with Frank. It was like an honor. It would be great to have on your resume. And also you could get known. If you got in the band and you travel around for a couple of years, you'd be seen. So, but Frank says, I don't care about your talent. You have to have a sense of humor. You have to have some eccentricity. And he didn't say it, and you got to have the right name. You know, to help you. You know, because there was lots of good singers probably competing with Ike Willis, but he had the name. And so he got picked. And then Ike, I'm not saying Ike, you know, was not worthy of being in the band. It was only because of his name. He was very talented anyways, but he had that extra little accident of nature, the accident of language. I mean, look at the name Zappa. What is a word that dominates the 60s? Everybody over as the 60s unfold, they all talk about being zapped. Zap, you know, that became part of the language in the global theater. Everybody's being zapped. And here's this guy with the name Zappa who did zapping kind of music. He had the dilemma himself, or the stigma.
And we have the apps after Zappa.
Oh, yeah, good point. After Z, the last letter in the alphabet, then you have the apps. And then you have the PA, which is anthropomorphic physical, backwards. Actually, it's not backwards, it's just you go in the opposite direction. It's a anodyne. What do you call those things? Anagrams that go back. B.O.B. is one of these.
Enneagrams, yeah.
The term. What?
Enneagram.
No, that's Gurdjieff.
Enneagramma.
This is.
Oh.
Is it
Anagramma.
It could be acronym. Anagramma might be it, but it's not the word I'm thinking of. There's a simpler word. Just a minute. Bert, talk to Roxy. I got to do something.
Okay.
Yes.
So.
And I think it's really amazing how artists are prophetic, like Nostradamus, because in a way they knew how to use the laws of media that they tried to management, and that's how Bob was sent to infiltrate McLuhan and Zappa. And also, for example, when we were listening to the audios last week, Bob was so prophetic because it's a way of seeing the new ground that is coming.
Yeah.
And maybe we can explain this idea of the ground in the Gestalt theory. There is this figure, is what is in the foreground, and the background is the ground. It's like in a painting. You have the character, for example, in a portrait, and that's the figure, and behind is the background, the ground. And McLuhan went to explore the ground of media, and he said it's not important what the content is. The ground is what is affecting us, and it's affecting the environment.
I enjoyed Bob's statement. He said in that with the Zappa Alley that Frank Zappa is like took the modern version of what McLuhan was doing, because he really presented a lot of a lot of material that was presenting the figures of what was going on at the time in the 60s and 70s. And it shows why he was outlawed on the so-called popular media landscape, because he was he presented a lot of teaching tools for those who, weren't going with it was like an anti-environment. He was more of an anti-environment, just put it that way.
Yes, and that's part of his style in his songs. He presents the familiar satire as figure. He has these jokes and this type of language you see in the radio, TV, and movies. That's a figure, and behind the ground is this complex music. Yeah. And the people are digesting this figure and the ground without being aware of the food they're getting. So he will play with both figure and ground to make his music. And I think he's a genius.
Is it also true that he mixed totally different pieces of work and somehow programmed that it all came out to some form of harmony? Is that true?
Well, that's what Bob is talking about when he's talking about the synchronicity. Yes, because he was mixing all sound landscapes, not only from all medias, from environment, from the musical traditions, all musical genres, but also his own music. He will remix and repaste and to create very complex, to be innovative. That was one of his techniques. He will mix things, or for example, he will take the bass of a song and put it with another song, or the rhythm, or different tracks. But different tracks that were in different tonalities or in different rhythms. And then he will translate that, transcribe it in a score, and that will be a new thing, much more complex.
Was that part of his synclav research?
Well, the synclavier was an extension of that because it made it easier. At the beginning, he would just, for example, cut and paste with these tapes, like in the concrete music, or mix different tracks. For example, something he did in the studio with something he did in a concert, different solos, and not only of the same song, complete different songs. So he was getting a remix, a replay of much more complex.
Damn.
In all aspects. But he was always surprised that instead of being chaotic and dissonant, and it was musical, and that was his surprise, because he said this is a type of alien synchronicity that he could not explain. How come things in different tonalities, different rhythms will sound so good, and with the synclavier, he had the opportunity to experiment faster, and it was easier because he said he doesn't have to pay the musicians for rehearsals. He has all these instruments, these virtual instruments in his library of electronic ensemble. And he can program all these things. He doesn't have to write the score. He will just put them in, and he will be able to cut and paste and remix and reverse, do all these things we are so familiar now with computers. And he said, I just need electricity. These musicians never get tired. They don't have to rehearse, and they can do very complex things in tune.
Yeah.
And in the right tempo.
Yeah, Bert, that was a very good explanation by Roxy.
Yeah.
You know, xenochrony means, xeno means strange. So strange synchronization would happen when he didn't intend it. He'd take something from one scene, one harmonic climate, mixed up with an obviously not resonant another harmonic climate. Then he'd be surprised to see patterns of complementarity or whatever his standard was. And so it would synchronize. And he was impressed with that. So, and he was trying not to have synchronicity. It's like when Ion spoke through,
he would take the track of a solo from one song and put it in a complete different song.
Right.
It would sound great.
That's right. Now listen to this. So when Ben talked to Zappa through Ion, Ben was very reluctant, but the main point I was saying that Frank was constantly making music that would upset people. He wanted to upset people. He hated it if it became popular. So the very fact that he was looking to create dissonance in a way is shown in this theory of xenochrony. He was trying to create dissonance, and then you wouldn't want it to synchronize, and it would. It strangely would synchronize. So he called that xenochrony, strange synchrony. And that's what you asked the right question.
The perfect way to use technology to make something new, because what can you do that is new in music? And so he will go and by chance find things out that he will not do if he was trying to do that aware, like. He's feeding this machine with information, and now we have programs that can do all types of variations of a theme. You can make all types of, for example, Baroque music or classical and this, and you just enter some information and the computer programs different variations, or you can enter a melody and the computer makes the harmony. And you can make different types of alterations of what the machine is proposing. But he was already doing that with his clavier. He will, but that he did also with his musicians. He will just give some ingredients, and then they had to cook something with that. And he will put these ingredients in the machine or from his tapes, and then he will mix them and have a new recipe, a new song.
He was the last great composer, really. I mean, just you sharing that, it's a sign that he used all the different. I mean, he was self-taught classically, but then he got into the electronic music and then saw or experienced so much, and he just threw it all in there. Because the Civilization Phase 3 is amazing. If you listen to it again, I mean, if you listen to it. He mixed so much in there that you could, each time you listen to it, just like listening to Ion, you hear something else. Just the whole mix. It's amazing.
Yes, and it's like Ion. He has these very serious things going on, very experimental, but then you hear the lyrics and they're all funny.
Yeah.
So
okay, guys, here's something. Yeah, go ahead. There is.
I see that very ironic, the satire and the humor into all of his work.
He's always trying to trick you up or set you up or make you aware of a shift. That's what Ion's always doing, too. Going along, setting you up, and all of a sudden he's praising you, and all of a sudden he turns on you and points out what you're really screwing up with. But I found the quote on "We're Only for the Money." So he's making this in 1967. He's not going to get the synclavier for another 15, 20 years. And he's already it's like he invented the synclavier. What he was working out in the 60s was the idea of something that then could be made by humans later, responding to Zappa's vision. So it says on the album cover, it says, all the music heard on this album was composed, arranged, and scientifically mutilated by Frank Zappa. And in brackets, with the exception of a little bit of surf music, close bracket. Then he says, this is what I'm going to ask Roxy about. None of the sounds are generated electronically. They are all the product of electronically altering the sounds of normal instruments. So what's the difference there? What's a generation sound by electronically? What's that?
Yes, because you can program a synthesizer to sound like a violin, for example.
Yeah.
But people who really know about music and instruments can see the difference. It's like you have in these organs, you have flute and strings and whatever that are supposed to be those instruments, but you can hear immediately this is not the real thing. It's an artificial sound generation instrument trying to be the instrument. And the thing with the instruments is when you play, for example, a violin, you have different types of attacking the instrument. For example, play legato or staccato, and you can do many different types of things as you play. And in the electronic instrument, all notes sound the same. So that's one of the things that many people were criticizing about electronic music, that they were trying to imitate the acoustic orchestra. But I think that's not the point with electronic music, is to go on and explore other sounds. But I think that was also part of selling the synthesizers and the organs, to have these libraries that were supposed to be orchestra sounds or pianos. And you have now, the synclavier already had digital recording, that's the sampler. So you have a digital recording of an acoustic instrument, or there are new technologies of synthesis. You have the waveform of instrument, and you can, it's like a digital recording. You have like the ground of the sound of the timbre, and then you can alter some of the parameters or values.
Parameters,
yeah. To make them change, to edit these fabric sounds or fabric libraries. But people who work with acoustic instruments and electronic instruments can hear the difference immediately. This is from a sound library, or this is a real orchestra.
Right, so listen to this. When he says, none of the sounds are generated electronically, that's what the first instruments would do. They would make an orchestra happen by generating them electronically, right? They try to match an orchestra.
So he says none of the sounds are electronic.
Generated electronically.
I suppose.
No, he says are generated electronically. What does that mean? What's it mean to be generate a sound electronically?
Yeah, you have the synthesizer or the sampler.
Okay, right.
And you make the instrument. You have many different values, parameters to program an instrument. We call them patches.
Right, and you're doing it to stimulate. You want to fool people that they're listening to an orchestra. You make it sound like an orchestra. That's not what he's doing. He's saying the sounds are the product of electronically altering the sounds of normal instruments. So they're not generated electronically.
He will make recording with real musicians, and then you can have, for example, a filter in a guitar like a wah-wah or reverb for the voice, or different types of electronic manipulations that you can do in the studio with the effects. So the instruments were real musicians, but they were altered with
right. So what you heard in the end on the LP was not what the musicians made. He would alter what the musicians made. Now, most people would say, "Wow, you can't. How are you going to perform that in a live audience? You know, a live concert? Like the bands had to sound like what the album sounded like." But Frank's making the guys not able to sound in live concerts what was done in the studio. See, most people would not do that. He did what you shouldn't do. He was fucking with the music.
Yes, but I think we want to develop we know that these are two different environments. For example, François Bell, one of my teachers, he was the director of the groupe de recherche musicale in Paris. He made very complex compositions with many tracks, and he said the performance of that piece was the composer mixing live the different tracks. And that was his concept of performing electronic music. You remix live, and you mute or add effects, or it's like a type of very sophisticated DJ.
Right. Now, would he then make it into an album? Would he then record that and make an album of it?
Yes, but one thing is the album, because that's only one interpretation. Right. And another will be in the concert every time it's different. And Zappa knew you have the studio environment, the clavier, but the live concert is another environment, and he will do other things. Maybe he has like a basic musical idea, but that was the problem. For example, his song was talking about when they were trying to make a repertoire, there is so many different versions of each song that it was hard to decide which solo, which version they should learn and play. And in some of the songs, he will do the solo from this version and then take the bass from another version. But the music of Zappa is not like a final song forever. Right. Every time he played.
Are you talking about Zappa or your professor? You talking about your mentor?
No,
or Zappa?
Now I'm talking about Zappa because.
Right. Okay.
He
would change every night.
He was just trying to reproduce what he did in the studio. He knew it's another environment, and even every night when they have like 2 concerts a day or different concerts during a week, the musicians will complain that there were things being changed, and the things they learned were never the same.
Yeah. They always had to keep. So, like Carolyn Guerdon's book says, it's not the final product that we're looking for. It's this endless process of tactile interplay with the environment he's engaging, either the live concert or the studio. That's the art, the ability to interact and stay involved, not producing some finished product.
It's a replay. Everything is a replay and a remix, and it's how we engage in conversation. We need to replay patterns. We need to replay experiences or whatever.
Right. Now, he says, after that statement, none of the sounds are generated electronically. They are all the product of electronically altering the sounds of normal instruments. Then he says, the orchestral segments were conducted by Sid Sharp under the supervision of the composer. Then he says, this whole monstrosity, there's your monster, this whole monstrosity was conceived and executed. He's calling the album Monstrosity, was conceived and executed by Frank Zappa as a result of some unpleasant premonitions, August through September 1967. So, these unpleasant premonitions. Then he says, all premonitions continuing to come true. And then he says, is this phase one of Lumpy Gravy? Now, I think he was intending on having Lumpy Gravy come out first, but there was contractual, different companies were putting it out, and so it got all bogged down, took another year to get out. So it came out, I think, after We're Only for the Money, though I have to check that. So that on We're Only for the Money, I think it says, is this phase one of Lumpy Gravy? So the interplay between Lumpy Gravy and We're Only for the Money is united by the electronic altering. That's what's in common. So
yes, but I think it's very interesting because it's not only the music being affected by the electronic environment; it's the whole environment, the whole society, the whole
yeah.
that is affected by the electronic.
That's Egyptian.
Yeah.
And all the kids who would come across Frank and just hear the entertainment part of it, they had no idea of what I'm going to talk about and what he was doing with the technology. He really was an invisible environment. He was known for a guy who ate shit on stage, which he never did, but that's what circulated. This guy, he's such a far-out hippie that he actually, somebody shit on stage and Frank went over and ate it. And,
that's the urban legend.
Right. And he begins his autobiography, I think, with this story. He says, that legend is not true. The only time he ever ate shit was at a buffet at a Holiday Inn in someplace in Arkansas. That's the only time he ever ate shit. So now I'm going to explain to you what is the continuity. Why is he a satellite conductor? So in the early 60s, when he starts practicing and rehearsing in Paul Buff's studio in Cucamonga, he eventually buys it in August 64 when he gets some money for a movie he scored. I think it's Run Home Slow, which was made by a high school teacher of his. And they were friends, so Frank did the music, and it took a while for the guy, I guess, to complete it or to get out there to make some money on it. So Frank got some money from it. Or I'm thinking he got a access to equipment. Okay, let's. I'm not trying here to be accurate. It's the idea. So what happened is he eventually got the money to buy the studio. But before August 64, when he bought the studio, he was hanging out with Paul Buff for a couple of years and learning his very complex, he had very avant-garde, advanced studio. So he's learning all this neat stuff that would serve him well. At one point, he buys a bunch of props sold, in Hollywood, and he's able to make a rocket ship. In the studio, there's an area where he puts together a rocket ship. Now, what's happening in that period, 62, 63, 64, is the American Mercury program, I think it was called. They were just starting to, catch up to the Russians and have John Glenn go around the planet a couple times or something. So they're doing early tentative experiments with their rocketry. So here's this, it's a figure. The American population knows that Kennedy's laid out the space dream of getting to the moon by the end of the decade. So it's a figure of what McLuhan would call industrial kinetic space, jumping on someplace and having a goal and trying to get there, while missing the simultaneous travel that people were experiencing under TV conditions, live TV conditions, or on the radio. They were transporting themselves all over the place electronically through radio, so they didn't need a rocket. So to get an old tin can, and set it up and land someplace was a pretty 19th century project. So Frank, I call him a satellite conductor. So you go back to what was he doing when he first got access to a studio. he mimes a satellite conductor, and he writes a screenplay about what he's doing. So you have this rocket set up in his lab there in the studio, and he's going to write a play called Captain Beefheart Meets the Grunt People. So I'm going to go through it and show you different aspects, conceptual continuity, overlappings with Ion and Us, and whatever other things I note. So it begins. This is it's dated. See at the end it says the date of this completion of this screenplay, August 20th, 1964. If it was one more day, August 21st, it would have been Reverend Stang's birthday. I'm not sure. Maybe Arthur Coker's birthday is August 20th, but there it is, August 20th, 1964. He had just bought the studio, I think, in August 64. So he just acquired the studio. Buff moves out, and now he's inspired to do what he was as a creator. He's going to make a movie, not necessarily going to make an album. He's going to make a movie. So I read it in detail, every line, and I ticked off points. So we talked about the repeating theme of somebody who worked for the government, some kind of project, maybe secret, getting fired, and they're pissed off. So on the first page of Captain Beefheart Meets the Grunt People, it says there's this desert town called Happy Valley, elevation 37 feet, population 2, and that's Billy Sweeney and his nephew. What's his nephew's name? Is Cecil. And so Billy and Cecil are occupying a kind of place where Charles Manson hung out in. He hung out in Death Valley and occupied the Spawn Ranch. So it's interesting. It's kind of a bleak scene. It was a town, but 10 years ago it was all of a sudden suffered the government taking away the big contract that employed the people in the little town, and then everybody went away. And only Billy Sweeney, who I think was the janitor at the whatever the industry was, and Cecil is his retarded nephew. So zipping through what I tick off little things, they say that the government took the big contract away and gave it to a machine shot in Chickamauga, Alabama. Gave it to a machine. And it's shot. Like, did the machine get shot? What is that about? It's like he gave the contract to the Android meme, to some non-human scenario. Took the contract away and gave it to a machine shot in Chickamauga, Alabama. A movie? Was it for a movie shot? Things are a lot quieter down there now in Happy Valley. Now remember, Zappa in 1970, according to Barry Miles, has a sign on his basement studio before he gets the big high-tech studio 10 years later. He has a sign saying Dr. Zircon Secret Lab in Happy Valley, something like that. I could actually look it up. It's got Dr. Zircon, it's got Lab, and it's got Happy Valley. But he'd already written a screenplay 6 years before based in Happy Valley. So it's autobiographical. There's an autobiographical level here. So moving along, it says Captain Beefheart is the host. He is narrating the story. And he says, this is Billy Sweeney, and it's just as he appeared on that happy day 22 years ago when he first started work at the plant. So there's your 22 right there. So that means 1942? That's when the World War II began. Late 1941, early 42. So 42 and 22 would be 1964. So there's the 22, and I'm just going to flip along here. The next thing is Beefheart himself has a machine. It's called the Watch-All machine. So Beefheart has some kind of secret hideout in the mountains, and he can watch everything. So that's sort of like Captain Beefheart. And it says, talking about, let's see, does Beefheart describe himself there? He talks about Billy Sweeney applying himself. What he did when he got laid off, Billy went sort of funny in the head. No matter what, he planned to work his way to the top. And so even though the environment for him to go to the top was disappeared, he couldn't be stopped. Not even the government could stop him. So the day he got laid off, he became a systematic plan of self-improvement. First, he tore the cover off a book of matches and sent away for a course in space science. He studied diligently, applying himself with fierce determination to each little lesson as it came in the mail. And when he flunked, he kept right on trying. He kept flunking the mail course. But he kept on trying, working his way to the lofty goal he'd set him for himself. A goal you won't believe when I tell you, says Captain Beefheart. Then he says, let's make it up to my secret mountain retreat where I keep the files on this stuff, kids. And then he dematerializes and rematerializes in the secret mountain retreat. So there's Captain Beefheart, being this mysterious person that Ion said he was in actuality. So Frank is like, in a way, he's like a strange non-physical situation is dropped in his lap. He's got this lab. He has a friend who's a strange character, like a mini Ion, and he can do all these fantastic non-physical things. And he's just describing the movie about his buddy Beefheart dealing with the environment in Southern California. So Beefheart says to the kids, I didn't lose any of you going through the dimension warp, did I? Real swell. And then he continues his narration. Now then, in order to understand this complex man, Billy Sweeney, and the unusual situation in which he is involved, I feel it would be best at this time to consult the watch-all machine. And he pushes a big red button, and a dossier marked Sweeney pops out of a convenient slot. We suddenly swish pan to a medium shot of Sue. That's Don Vliet. He added Van later. Don Vliet's mother, Sue, is a character in here. Suddenly swish pan to a medium shot of Sue scolding from the doorway. Now, she's always yelling at Don. Don's a totally spoiled kid, and all he does when he gets yelled at is he just demands for her to get him a Pepsi. So this comes out in the script. So Frank is literally describing his buddy as a character using biographical information. So let's see. Sue yells at Beefheart, Donnie, how many times have I told you about bringing your imaginary playmates in the house? So the parent thinks that Don is fantasizing everything. Beefheart says, damn it, Sue, I'll bring him in here if I want to. I told you to stay out of my room anyway. So Sue says, is that any way to talk to your mother? Now, is it? And he says, shut up and get me a Pepsi. So she goes and gets him Pepsi. So that's just a little background. So then it says here, the remainder of this dialogue is accompanied visually by a series of shots of the machine. That would be the watch-all machine. Cut to the rhythm of the speeches. Hear that, Roxy? The scene is cut to the rhythm of the speeches,
yes,
of the talk.
That's what we recognize when he's playing. He has this rhythm of a speech.
That he's miming, electronically amplified music. So he says the remainder of this dialogue is accompanied visually by a series of shots of the machine, and the shots are cut to the rhythm of the speeches, occasionally punctuated by the watch-all machine effects loop. So there he is spelling out how he composes. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah, the father complains that Don stinks, and he never washes in his socks or in his bedroom, and they're stinking out the place. And he says, and you ought to tell Don for me, he says to his wife, that his little room smells like a camel who's been eating peanut butter sandwiches. Okay? Now, when Gail reports in one of these books on Zappa, her first night with Frank in August 64, August 66, 2 years later, right around the time Lenny Bruce dies, she says that Frank was the most, ill-kempt, slovenly dressed guy she'd ever met. He smelled, but especially his mustache area around his mouth smelled of peanut butter, because he used to live on peanut butter when he had no money. So here's Frank saying that Beefheart smells of peanut butter. So he must have known, this is 2 years before Gail notices, he must have known that he smelled like that, but he projects it on Don. So that's a cute little autobiographical thing. Are you with me, guys? You still here?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
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 I feel like eating peanut butter now.
I can't make out when you're on speakerphone. What'd you say?
Yes, I felt like eating a peanut butter sandwich.
Oh, is that really before I said that?
No, as you're saying.
Now you will. Now you will.
No.
Okay, in case you make a sound, so I know you're still there. Because if I get disconnected, I can go on for 10 minutes before I knew it.
Okay.
So
I mute myself
one of the,
because I'm just listening.
That's all right. Yeah, you can mute yourself, but every now and then come in. So under sound, at a certain point in the script, it says dynamo hum. Now, dynamo hum is an important part of the Uncle Meat play presented in the 1969 album called Uncle Meat in the booklet. Dynamo hum. And he also did a song called Dynamo Hum. So he's got Dynamo Hum there in 1964. He doesn't say anything about it, just that there is environmental effects around Billy's, where Billy keeps his rocket, his launch room. It has a Dynamo Hum sound. See, so as you build up an awareness of all these different aspects and images in Frank's work, you see that his album covers were showing you a fragment of the big album, of the whole thing, of the whole environment. And so you'll see Dynamo Hum said here, and then it'll show up later as another use. But it is part of the whole. You're looking at a huge, like an elephant, and one album will give you the leg, another album will give you the neck, another album will give you the trunk, another album will give you the ears, you know. And once you know all the stuff, you see that his album titles are all the aspects of the same scene, where a guy has a rocket, and he's going to compete with the government and get to the moon first. This old janitor is determined to make his own rocket and get to the moon. Now, that's a pretty lofty ambition, right?
Yeah.
But maybe he's working on that.
Zappa is, yeah. Well, we're going to get to that. So I'll say that. There's more to say, but I want to say a few more samples and then get to the next big statement. So you know that this guy's pissed off, and he wants to get to the moon and claim it for himself. Fuck the government. And in this movie, it says, rock and roll fills the hollow room. The hollow room. He listens. Billy listens for a moment and resumes his deodorizing. So you have this rock and roll environment. The transistor radio environment is always being pointed out in this situation. The ground of transistor radio to whatever the figure activities are as figure. So Beefheart says, yes, kids, you're right again. Billy has been saving Cecil for the final test. Now what he's going to do is he's going to stuff Cecil in the rocket and send them to the moon. But first he has to test the Van Allen belt. He has to see if a human can survive the Van Allen belt. He said Cecil, he has nothing to do but care for these horses, and he tries to offer horse rides to kids, but there's nobody in the area, so he doesn't get any business, having horse rides. So every now and then he loses a horse. He doesn't know what happened. Well, it turns out Billy stole the horse, put it in his rocket ship, set it up there, and see if he died. And two horses did die going through the Van Allen radiation belt. So it didn't look too good for humans. And it says 3 times Billy launched his proud ship, and 3 times it returned with a dead pony in it. It seems they always perish going through the Van Allen radiation belt. Billy has learned all he can from the ponies. A stage has been reached now where a pony just won't do. Billy needs a human. And so Beefheart says, yes, kids, you're right again. Billy has been saving Cecil for the final test. Cecil is still in the dark about the whole thing, of course. After all, he's got his mind on the business, and the business of his own non-horse ride business, and the terrible loneliness of his life in Happy Valley. So in Gravity's Rainbow, the punchline is this Nazi rocket manager is putting a little kid in, I think a sexually abused kid first, into a rocket and testing it. So Pynchon, who becomes a big fan of Zappa, what he develops in a 1973 novel, Zappa lays out 10 years before. The idea of stuffing somebody without their approval in a rocket. So I don't think Pynchon would know about Frank's screenplay. It didn't get out much. But it's just an interesting parallel. So it's almost like, what is this new environment leads to the horrible scenario of what would be the worst thing is if they stuffed you, Bert, in the rocket ship and sent you out there, and you weren't sure you'd get back. That would be a nightmare for kids, right? If you put into one of these NASA spaceships without your approval. And it says, kids, you realize it's been 10 years since Cecil has seen or talked to anyone except Billy. 10 years of isolation. Do you have any idea what that can do to a man? It's almost a satire of Frank. He's not really isolated, but he is spending a lot of time by himself at the studio. But Billy Sweeney fits more of Frank's project. Okay, so moving along to the next. So Larry shows up. You'll hear on Shake Your Booty some of the musicians talking. It just is a little soundbite between songs, and they say something like, "Yeah, it's been completely different ever since Larry left," or "We don't know what happened to Larry. We don't know if he's having any fun." So there's this comment on Larry. In 1979, you go back 15 years, turns out Larry is a loser who shows up and is obsessed with pony rides because his father owns a ranch, works with horses, but won't let Larry have rides on them because I think the reason was that Larry would get dirty and track horse manure into the home. So the father didn't tolerate Larry being near the ponies, even though it was his father's business. So Larry is frustrated. He wants to have a pony ride, so he finds out Cecil's doing it in Happy Valley, so he shows up. Well, quickly, Cecil doesn't know this, but Billy decides to put Larry in the rocket ship, not Cecil. He's a perfect guy. So you have this horrible murder scene going along in this silly environment where this guy is trying to create. So he's kind of showing the sacrifices science makes, the cruelty that science does that's not talked about, right, in doing their experiments, or some scientists. So, but Larry says, you wouldn't believe it, but I hate my father, and that's why I ran away. In a way, Larry is partly Frank, because Frank has, as it comes out in his brother's book, has real tension between Frank and his father. They really struggle to remain, a family. They're really bugged by each other. So this thing about hating my father, and that's why I ran away, gets Larry in trouble. So it could be an aspect of Frank in that character. So another point is to sound filtered music from transistor radio. I don't know why it says filtered. Maybe it just means music coming from the transistor radio. But there's the hidden ground of the radio again, or transistor radio. And whipping along here, looking for the next ticked-off point. If you have anything to say, Bert, you can speak. Anything that comes to mind.
Well, I was thinking how he had to be a rock star because rock is tactile. The word rock and roll, meaning engaging sex, and this is like the new type of homily, the new type of coitus. And in the tetrad, McLuhan is doing at the end of the Laws of Media, he says, the rock star is like a person one wears, something like that. Or maybe
you wear them as clothing, you mean?
Yeah, he says the rock sound bubble is not for listening to, but for wearing and participating in. Right.
That's the. I thought you meant that we wear the rock star. Yeah, we wear the rock music. He's in the Tony Schwartz recordings. He says that. He says it's like foam rubber. The music presses up against you, and you respond to it like as if you're a big sponge pressing against, massaging your skin. Yeah, we put yourself in a space bubble.
He also talks about the acoustic environment being a type of clothes that surrounds you.
Yes. Well, he said radio provided a privacy bubble for the kids at home. In their suburban homes, they'd want privacy, and they put on the radio, and that would shut out the rest of the home sounds, and they do the homework with the radio on if they did the homework. And it was a privacy bubble that radio created after it was superseded by television and computers and satellite. Like, it wasn't a privacy bubble really when it was the hidden ground in the 20s and 30s. It was a tribal ESP experience of simultaneity. But when it got displaced by the new preference for TV, then the teenager and the rock and roll industry hijacked it for the space bubble, for the private identity, post-littered private identity of an acoustic space bubble, right? Your own little private space. So that's a good point to bring up. So,
in a way, as McLuhan said, all medias are amplifying one of our senses, and the PA system, he puts in this tetrad the inflated persona for everyone to wear. So
inflated persona? What's persona?
Like an individual. Persona.
Right.
Inflated persona.
Oh, that means that you're the content of the radio. So you get on, you're Bob Hope, and you get on the radio, or Orson Welles, and you inflate yourself while putting on the whole world. Is that what it says? You inflate the persona?
Well, I understand it like, for example, we are all wearing Bob when we listen to Bob, or we wear Zappa when we listen to Zappa. It's like we fuse with the amplified
You put
persona.
on the artist. You put on the medium. You wear the medium, and you're the content. What your experience that you bring to it is the content, but you're wearing the artist or the poem or the book or the radio as an environment, as clothing. But what is it? What did he say after persona? You inflate the persona. What did he say?
For everyone to wear.
Yes. The electric world allows you, this wearing aspect is revealed under electric conditions. Nobody thought of wearing books, but the fact that everybody is inside the electric environment, it suddenly occurs to people, oh, geez, we're wearing this thing, sharing the same space. Then you project that back onto the history media. Oh, people wore the alphabet, and they wore the book, and they wore speech. But they didn't know that until they had a massive discarnate wearing session with radio environment. So it changed the perception of the past.
And that perception came after the television came. Is that what you're saying, Bob? That wearing.
Once radio and electric simultaneous environments, beginning with radio, came in, it made people, some people, maybe artists, notice that they're kind of wearing the whole population. It was like clothing. Then they said, oh yeah, that's what we're doing. People were wearing books, 200 years ago. People were wearing manuscripts. People were wearing speech. They go back through media, through the epiphany that radio gave them.
Yes, and I find this idea very interesting, how we get addressed with the things we're engaging, like Zappa music, or his ideas is part of another type of clothing you're putting on, these patterns, these ideas in your other bodies. It's how you dress the other bodies, not the physical, but the others.
The new organs.
We're talking about.
Dressing. Yeah. You're addressing new extended ears, new extended mouths. In War and Peace in the Gold Village, McLuhan talks about fashion and calls it the Boer War. And it's spelled B-O-E-R. It's a pun on the war in South Africa, at the end of the 19th century. The colonialists, wiping out the natives, which Pynchon uses in his novels, especially in Gravity's Rainbow, that scenario. The clash between the pre-literate tribal people and the literate European countries. But fashion, if you're not into fashion, it's a Boer war. It's boring. So it says Cecil and Larry are bouncing with joy that they think that they're going to. Billy convinces Larry that this rocket ship is a new kind of pony, and the pony ride he's going to get is by getting inside this fucking weird thing that's going to move. So Cecil and Larry are bouncing with joy at the fact that Larry's going to get his pony ride. We can see Billy re-entering the lab through a secret door. He is wiping his hands on his coveralls and smiling. Now, are coveralls that kind of farmer bib and shoulder straps? You know what I mean? All right? Yes. They're called coveralls. Yes. Well, Frank has a picture of himself with coveralls on the 1969 album Uncle Meat in the booklet. So you're saying, why is he presenting himself as a farmer? Well, he's presenting himself as Billy Sweeney, as a metaphor, which no one would know because they didn't have the transcript of the play. The play had been written 5 years before, but I just noticed that. He was wiping his hands on his coveralls and smiling. Okay. So moving along quickly to the next ticked-off part. The rocket ship is made of cardboard. Now, not only is it a preposterous project to beat the government to go to the moon, but you're going to do it by building a rocket ship out of cardboard? We're basically we're looking at an apparently retarded person with a fantasy project. And, McLuhan said television brought in people as content started fantasizing. So here's this guy fantasizing under the TV situation. And Billy is explaining to Larry and Cecil, what's he saying? He says, the world has no conception of my discovery. My children, this sleek space, or rather this he started to say spaceship, and he stops himself. This sleek space, this spirited steed, horse, right? This spirited steed is not made out of metal, nor is it made out of two bigger ponies. It only looks like metal because of the rivets I painted on it. And Cecil says, not metal? And Billy says, in the manner of a TV pitchman, no, cardboard. It's light, easy to work with. Metal and bigger ponies are definitely harder to manage. I simply take some old boxes, staple them together, and impregnate them with this liquid, giving to the material an unbelievable strength and resistance to adverse environmental conditions. That's ionic. That's what we do. We impregnate with our new iCell into certain things. So here's Frank picking up on an ionic invention. Wouldn't you be? You guys are surprised if you saw our cold fusion machine, and you saw a look on the surface it was made out of fucking crude cardboard? You go, what the fuck? But so this is Billy doing Bob, 50 years before, saying that we impregnated with this cardboard, with this liquid, giving to the material an unbelievable strength and resistance to adverse environmental conditions. Now, somebody might say, well, science has done that since then, right? They probably have all kinds of stuff they inject into other stuff to make them stronger. Yeah, but it can be applied to us, too. And that's probably more applicable. So, this cheap rocket, and he fools Cecil and Larry to be enthusiastic about it. And this script is made up of 107 pages, and we're at page 41 already, so it's pretty neat. So, we're going on pretty fast if you're bored. In the instructions on the side, it says, this develops into what is this? He's talking about a youth band plowing through a crowd. What is this? Along the last 10 pages, what's happened is they focus on a politician, Senator Gurry, who is responsible for getting the American spaceship on the moon. And he's got an astronaut called Johnny Smith. And Johnny Smith is the all-American athlete kind of guy. He's described in the cast as a corn-fed astronaut, Johnny Smith. And Senator Gurney works for the government. You hear about Senator Gurney in Absolutely Free in 1967. Gurney is the name of the attorney who straps on the 13-year-old chocolate syrup, smothers her in chocolate syrup. I think his name is Gurney. I know the name Gurney, the attorney Gurney shows up. So the name Gurney was already happening in 1964. So Gurney is organizing this official moon launch. So there's a big celebration as they get ready to launch it, and it says there's a band continuing to march and play through a crowd. They're knocking down the crowd, mowing the crowd over, but they don't even care, and they just keep continuing marching and playing. The people with signs start whacking, signs supporting the launch, start whacking at the band for stepping on their feet. In retaliation, the youthful musicians play louder and empty their spit valves on the enemy's shoes. This develops into a minor riot as the crowd, still cheering, proceeds to beat the youngsters about the head and shoulders, rendering all of them unconscious except the guitar player, who, swinging his instrument like a machete, beats a path to safety. Now, it's interesting. The guitar player survives. That's a metaphor for Frank using the guitar to beat off the stupid crowd. He can use the latest technology to become a really good guitar player. Everybody else using obsolete tools dies, but he gets to safety. So it's interesting how he singles out the guitar player as surviving the riot. But this huge riot breaks out.
The one who gets the new frequency, the guitar player, is a survivor.
Did you say virus?
No.
Fire?
The survivor.
Survivor, right.
Survivor.
So you have so Billy and Larry and Cecil. So Larry goes out there and survives the radiation belt and comes back, and they're all happy. Shit, Larry survived it. So now they're going to make the official launch, and this time it's going to be Billy, Cecil, and Larry, because Billy now thinks, okay, we can get through the Van Allen belt. We sacrificed Larry; he survived it, so we can do it. So Billy launches himself, and they head for the moon. And Senator Gurney is having big celebrations to launch their thing almost like the same day. And it says, the minutes tick by as the final stages are reached in the countdown. A mere 3 hours now till Johnny Smith makes history in his sleek modern vessel, which I understand, this is a newscaster saying this, which I understand is called, and so appropriately, the Spirit of Cape Smedley. So they're at Cape Smedley, that's Cape Canaveral in reality, but Cape Smedley, and I think the Spirit of something was the name of Lindbergh's plane when he flew across the Atlantic Ocean in 1927 or so. So I think it's, or maybe it's a reference to the name of the plane, the Wright brothers, when they created flight in 1904 or so. The Spirit of something might have been on their plane. So it's a historical reference. Actually, by the clock, it is 2 hours and 58 minutes till the lift up. But the tension is getting to be, wait, we've just been handed a special bulletin. And they don't give it to you right away. It's back to Larry and Cecil. Billy is sitting at the controls of the rocket ship, and Cecil and Larry have to stand during the whole trip holding on like subway straps, holding on little straps, okay, bouncing about. So Billy is keeping an aristocratic distance between him and his assistants. Then Larry is saying, they're talking about what happened, what they go through. Because, when they go to the moon, they start to distort. Larry and Cecil become confident, and Billy becomes a little kid. So they're distorted when they go through the Van Allen belt, which is pretty interesting. Where did Zappa get that idea from? Is that known physics, that's what happens? I don't know.
Yes, and actually some of the conspiracy theorists say that's impossible to go through this radiation.
Right. You can't do a moon landing. It's impossible. That's what they say, right? So it happened in Nevada.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know what the Evergreens said it? What happened is they did go to the moon, but the footage the people saw on TV was shot from Nevada someplace. So the TV show was not the actual moon, but the guys were on the moon, and they didn't want to take a chance of broadcasting some unforeseen disaster, so they wouldn't let the people see what the astronauts were actually experiencing. They couldn't take that risk. So they faked the content. So you see, so people who notice this, and they've written books on it, look, the thing's got shadows, they can tell it's a fake set. They figure out and kind of prove it. Well, it doesn't mean they didn't go to the moon. It's just that they didn't show us what they did in going to the moon. So that's a pretty neat take. Clear up that bullshit.
Yeah.
Kubrick made that shootings.
Who?
Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, Kubrick. That's right. Yeah. They say Stanley Kubrick did it. Right. So Larry's saying, talking about the experience, Yeah, let me see. What did they? I think they've landed. Let me just check. Yes, so they've landed, and they're reporting what they went through. And Larry says, well, I got this funny tingling in the back of my neck all of a sudden, and then bloop, I saw a whole bunch of colors blinking on and off. I guess it was just on a little daydream or something. It's like the ending of Kubrick's 2001 where the guy goes into this weird psychedelic trip, at the end of the movie. Well, Zappa anticipated this. He's saying Larry went through a bunch of psychic hallucinations, a whole bunch of colors blinking on and off. And he said, I guess I was just on a little daydream or something. So isn't that neat?
Yeah.
Yes, and he calls his daughter Moon Unit.
Moon Unit. I'm going to explain that. We're going to explain that in a minute. That's the next aspect of the big picture. So as a result of where was that?
But I see this cardboard rocket. He was sort of seeing the illusion and
of the actual space program, space race.
Yes, and also the hologram on Hollywood. Everything is glamour. Glamour is the illusion of elegance, but everything is illusion. Everything is fake. Everything is a prop.
Everything is cheapness. So the newscaster says, and Senator Gurney regrets to inform the public of this cancellation. They've canceled the rocket launch due to the presence in the atmosphere above Cape Smedley of some sort of alien rocket vehicle. So they're saying something was seen, and then he says, I repeat, due to this critical condition, the planned lunar landing mission has been temporarily postponed. So Senator Gurney is totally pissed off that something has gone out there and forced them to cancel, and they're going to try to figure out what the hell was that. So the race to the moon is on, and Billy has got the first jump. Let's see. Okay. Billy says, who is he saying this to? So Billy is saying to Cecil and Larry, we are about to embark on a perilous mission to outer space. Our destiny lies ahead. We shall conquer the moon. In the name of decency and all that is clean and good, in the name of Happy Valley, land of my youth, and all that it has stood for in the past, its inherent rural cleanliness and strength of spirit, the true spirit of our great land. For this we risk our lives now, as did our forefathers at Bunker Hill and Anzio and Mount Suribaki, all those places. For all this, we now depart for the moon. So I forgot to say that that was his speech before they got in there and took off for the moon. So he's going to claim it for him in his neighborhood. Okay, so moving along now, looking for the next pickup.
I was thinking how this meme of the new frontier going further is also the thing with the media. We were always trying to expand, to go further, and then with the visual bias, we thought it was going to the moon or going to space, but the real expansion was to go to the non-physical, reconnect something.
And the first phase of that was the electronic retrieval. And so the electronic retrieval and wiping out of the guff, we're already traveling by TV before we go to the moon. And that's a key point McLuhan uses to make fun of what's going on. Everybody's living in the rearview mirror, and they're doing an old 19th century replay with the rockets and ignoring the collective.
With Bonanza, we think it's going to conquer new territory in the desert.
Yeah,
right.
It's still going on.
So, yeah, and the newscaster says, and they're talking about the launch of the Johnny Smith, the regular launch. And there he goes, folks, up through the troposphere, up through the stratosphere, up through the ionosphere, up, up, up. What a man, what a ship. I remember Ion, in one of the rewrites, laid out the 7 spheres the troposphere, the stratosphere, and the ionosphere. But there's the ionosphere right there. I mean, that's technically a scientific place, but I project my own world into that word.
No, that's a sign. That's a sign.
That's right. Yes. You can say the troposphere was the book. Yeah, the troposphere is the electric age, the stratosphere is the Android meme, and the ionosphere is the hexatic world we're into right now with the iCell. The troposphere is the electronic, analog electric environment, stratosphere is the digital environment, and the ionosphere is Dobbstown. Okay. We're on page 62, moving along. He has, it's one of the sound effects, suitable electronic lunar ballet music. Suitable electronic lunar ballet. All right. And all this time, while Johnny Smith is going towards the moon, he's reminiscing about his own life, his youth. It's like he's seeing his life flash before him. He talks about, me and my three buddies took off about 7 a.m. in a little 39 Studebaker. Frank is always talking about this 39. He has a Chevy, I think, sometimes. Now a Studebaker. It's always 1939 for some reason. He refers to that year in the car culture. I think I jumped ahead at one point where Johnny's talking about.
It's fun how Frank makes a parody on science in the whole space program. It's funny.
Yeah, he's not being fooled by the new technology. He's ready to just show how stupid it is. And there's even more to this appropriate metaphor or appropriate strategy. Okay, so I guess I haven't got to it yet. There's a statement by Johnny which is interesting. Now, on the moon, there's a problem. The moon is already occupied by Celestia. And Celestia is this, how is she described? This woman.
Spider woman?
No, not the Spider Woman. Celestia, a queen from the moon with green skin. Now, green is my color on the chart. A queen on the time note chart. A queen from the moon. So this is an odd mutation. Now, she's scheming to take over Earth. But she's surprised when these humans end up on her planet. She doesn't know where they came from.
That was the same thing with the giant last Payday.
The giant spider and the woman.
What was her name?
That's Drachma.
Yeah.
Queen of Cosmic Greed. Now, that's going to be Huntington. That's the same story 10 years later, 8 years later. And I'm going to explain why it's the same story. So Celestia says she encounters Billy, I guess. Who is this? Who's she talking to? She's talking. Wait a minute. Yeah, Cecil has they've landed, successful landing, and now she confronts these humans. So she tells them, "We are the last tragic remnants of a perishing race, a love-starved race, more highly developed than your Earth women in the mysterious feminine arts, and we have waited many time periods." Note that phrase, many time periods, not a lot of time, but time spans. We have waited many time periods for a contact such as this. It seems as though our prayers have been answered. Come with us. We have prepared a feast. And Cecil goes, feast? Like eating? And we move through some other scenes with Senator Gurney and Johnny. And then, here's where Johnny says, he's remembering as a youth, he loved the DJ named Howling Hogman. So that's a takeoff on Wolfman Jack, who used to broadcast out of Mexico, that Zappa would listen to in the 50s, I guess, early 60s. So Johnny remembers he loved this DJ called the Howling Hogman. That's what they used to call him. And he had a funny old voice, let me tell you. Good mercy. I used to sit there and laugh till I was blue in the face. Yuck, yuck, yuck. So he's a really corny guy. Now here's Frank. In the sound column, he writes electronic rock and roll. Not electric rock and roll, not just rock and roll. He says electronic rock and roll. This is 1964. What's electronic rock and roll in 1964? So, okay, carrying on. So, Celestia falls in love with Billy, and she wants to fuck him, and she's trying to organize an orgy because she's got a bunch of other women hanging around her team. And she wants Larry and Cecil to fuck the other women, and she wants to fuck Billy. Because, as she said, she's love-starved. They haven't fucked anybody in years, stuck there on the moon, because their race got wiped out. But I'm missing the here it is. So here's an interesting statement by Johnny. He says, I suppose that each and every one of us as Americans has had or has right now or will have at some time or another a favorite disc jockey. That's just said right out of the blue. What's that about? The guy is, has he landed yet?
But
yeah,
it's true
he hasn't
because now
get ready.
Kids doesn't want to be rock stars anymore. Nowadays, everybody wants to be a DJ, not a musician.
Yes, a DJ or a Bill Gates. They want to come up with an app and start a computer empire.
Yes.
But yes, they want to be a DJ. Even I became a DJ. Look at me, always adapting to the fads. You can look at my life. And Bob was a trendmonger all along. I mean, I did it without knowing I was doing it, but I ended up being a great DJ, and I didn't know that's what everyone wanted to be. I'm causing everybody wanting to be a DJ. That's what's going on.
Yeah, there you go.
I got there
the
first.
Evolution. Zappa had to be a rock star, and you had to become a DJ.
Yeah,
that was the next step.
I had to sample Frank. He's my content. Sample him and everybody else.
Remix him for your xenocracy.
Right. That's right. So Johnny says, for some reason, I suppose that each and every one of us as Americans has had or has right now or will have at some time or another a favorite disc jockey. That's Frank pointing out the programmed environment, right? Which sound like an obvious thing to an engineer. What do you mean? Everybody knows that. But you have to look at the obvious and look at the figure ground meaning of it. It'll have relevance later. So that's why he says the old Howling Hog Man was my favorite, and still is for that matter. And I'll probably never outgrow my love for him and the music he plays. Back in the late 50s, Frank talks about how it was a serious statement among intellectuals that rock and roll was a fad. And Frank realized early on that it wasn't a fucking fad. It was a new environment, and it's not going to go away. So he refers to that when he says he has this Johnny guy as a big insight. I'll probably never outgrow my love for him and the music the DJ plays. That leads to the nostalgia industry. You know, these companies that recycle all the old bands from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. You know, it's an important part of the person's being. It's like keeping a person alive. They have to see.
Today I read there's going to be a 1-year-long festival in London because of the 40th anniversary of punk. 1 year long.
Right, and that's
really?
because it's an important part of their biology. It has to be done. You know, because it's part of people's, it's like, we're going to keep breathing. We must keep breathing. We like it here, and we're going to keep breathing. Well, you got to have, we've had punk, and we must keep it going. We can't stop it. The wars happen when somebody wipes out a whole technical setup and then erases people's memories, and then they bring in a new technology, a new civilization, which the Evergreen said will be the final Armageddon, when we invent a technology that we know, when we implement it and press the button and it goes into action, we will forget everything we ever knew. Yes, and that will be the price you pay for this new technology. And the war will be whether to do that or not. I don't want to forget everything. No, don't press that button. The other idiots, the drunks and cocaine freaks will say, fuck it, I don't care. I had a lousy life. I don't want to remember it. Press that fucking button. All right, so there's a spiritual battle right there.
The
What'd you say, Roxy?
Addict. Yeah,
the Capsicum. Yeah.
It's still
okay.
They can still sell some safety pins, so yeah, there's still a market there. So.
Who did that? Who paid off the London mayor and the government to allow something to go on for a year? You know, and maybe Prince Charles. Probably Prince Charles did it. The least likely guy. So poor Johnny recognizes that he'll never outgrow his love for rock and roll, or that DJ. So then Johnny a little later says, music expresses the heart and soul. So here's Frank talking about the environment. Music expresses the heart and soul of mankind, whether he be exalted or humble or rich or poor. Then he says, and my life has been lived clean with a lot of music in it. And Frank would say, well, you never heard any music. That's just new life. That's just Muzak or ugly radio, whatever Frank would say. Because Frank said nobody knew what music was, and even if it bit him on the ass. He says that in Time magazine in October '69. So here he's pointing out that a person is now saying, yes, my chemical body has been lived cleanly, but I've got my electronic self. And that's expressed as, my body has a lot of music in it. So it's just an odd statement, you know. In the middle of this corny drama of the space race, Frank is putting these statements in there. At one point when...
He says, I got my electronic self?
Self, did you say? Self?
Yeah, what did you say?
I said, he said, my life has been lived clean and with a lot of music in it. In other words, he's talking about his listening experience. He's a consumer, like all Americans in the 60s, of pop radio. But why would a guy be written? I don't know any other character has ever said that. Yeah, I've had a pretty good life, and I've had a lot of music in it. You ever said that about yourself? Well, you have. You're a composer. But Bert never said that about himself.
No.
It's like...
It is odd in the middle.
What?
It is odd to put that in the middle of this.
Yeah.
You
have a lot of music in your life. It's invisible environment. You take it as a cliche. It's a given. You don't make a point. You don't observe it. You don't make a statement about it. It's part of the cliche environment. So you see my point, right? That's sort of odd. This Johnny Apple, this all-American cornhead, corn-grown, Midwest corny guy. Corn-fed. He's saying, my life has been lived clean with a lot of music in it. Yeah, I mean, is that what Donald Trump's going to say when he accepts the presidential mantle, when he wins the election? He's going to say, yeah, it's been a great life. I had a lot of music in it, a lot of TV, a lot of video, which is a way of saying you still think your chemical body is the focus of your being. What Johnny's really saying is that my physical body's been cleaned, and I have many other bodies made up of musical consumption. He's pointing to a multiple body experience, but said rearview mirror as if it's just the chemical body. So at one point when the guys when Johnny Smith lands on the moon, he lands after Cecil. It says rocket screaming in, the sound, rocket screaming in. That is the opening line in Gravity's Rainbow by Pynchon. A screaming comes heard across the sky. It's a very poetic statement. So here's Frank. You know, and Frank's a manipulator. There's like a similarity between Pynchon and Frank. They're both born around the same time, and they're both sort of dealing with 50s America and then promoting some release from it. And they're both looking very interested in the history of the Nazis and what happened to the Nazis. If you look on the album cover for the Grand Wazoo, it shows whatever the guy's name, Uncle Meat, the evil scientist. It shows his laboratory, and it has the book Arms of Krupp. It's got a bunch of books, and one of them is the history of the German armaments industry, the Krupp family. So, and someone else Barry Miles or somebody noticed that Frank was reading the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich or something. He had a fascination for that period. But while he's saying in his early albums, the Nazis are running your town, he almost predicted what May would find out. May Brussels. Literal Nazis. So, moving along, we're getting close to the end. You're enjoying this, right? Going through these patterns. They say, somebody uses the word bacino. So Billy says, what's this bacino? She said bacino. And she says, Celestia, the Moon Queen, says, I guess they monitor your late-night TV shows. That's a line from an old Zsa Zsa Gabor movie called Queen of Outer Space. So there's a media clip that is brought in, a phrase from a TV show that's brought up uttered on the moon. It's actually, So while Celestia's trying to seduce Billy, all of a sudden they're shocked because the grunt people show up. Yeah, remember, this is called Cat and Beefheart versus the grunt people, and they're some kind of alien race. So the grunt people take over and basically arrest everybody. And they go, with us you will come, cave-wise, our hideout to go, on the dark side of the moon. It says moon dark side. Ha, bacino. And then Billy says, what's this bacino? Because the second grunt uses the phrase. So Celestia says, I guess the grunts monitor your late-night TV shows. That's a line from the old Zsa Zsa Gabor movie, Queen of Outer Space. So a little bit of mixed media thrown into the scenario. Beefheart is back home, and he's listening. His mother and father are watching roller derby, entertaining some TV content. And Beefheart gets pissed off at them that they're when they start watching. A little later, they start watching the moon landing, and he says, "What are you fucking doing? We've got something happening here on the moon." Now Beefheart, through his watch all, can see that something's weird's going on the moon. So he's trying to get Sue and his father to listen, but they won't. They're too busy watching first roller derby and then the moon landing. No, sorry, not the moon landing. That's 5 years later in the second script. So they're watching roller derby. Now, another thing about Beefheart, he used to have these rashes. And if they got really bad, he'd have to go hang out at some relative's house and lay low so that nobody saw him. So Frank refers to that. Says Beefheart, we see him digging away at an imaginary nerve rash under his skin. Imaginary nerve rash. His eyes are rolling back slightly. He is muttering unintelligible things about a bread man. And the bread man was his father. His father was a bread man. So there's a little exposure of Beefheart's actual life, or Don Vliet's life, with his rashes. Then it says, the king of the grunts, he has a torture room. And the king squats on a throne raised above the level of the others. The room is dark and dismal. The stone walls ooze green slime, which glistens in the eerie illumination. Dense putrid vapors rise from orifices in the floor, hazing the scene. So in the 70s, there's a song called The Torture Never Stops. And this evil prince is torturing people and other things in the basement. And I think it has green slime walls. So the torture chamber is a key motif that starts off in 1964. And it's a putrid environment. That's how the evil prince is doing it in Virginia many years later in the later song. Okay, so we're almost finished here. Billy says... He says, shucks, here I thought all the time that you and your little buddies lived up here. Well, you live and learn. This phrase, you and your little buddies, you hear Frank use that in another song or two. When he's mocking fads, he says, you and your little buddies. So it's already got it here in the script. And this is a year before the Mothers of Invention are formed. So Johnny... he's now forced to deal with Billy. He meets Billy and Cecil and Larry. He says, wow, I'll be Never in my wildest imaginings could I have foreseen anything of this magnitude. Here I am, back to back with a being from another world. He thinks Billy and Johnny have been captured by the king of the grunts, and they're tied up together back to back. And Johnny thinks Billy is an alien. Here I am, back to back with a being from another world. I mean, people up here on the moon I could have figured. I had my suspicions about this place for a long time, but as far as the other, more distant worlds was concerned, well, I just never would have believed it. Say, maybe we can work a deal. You got the spaceship, and I got the brains. Maybe together the both of us could escape. You ever hear of a place called Earth? Billy, marveling at Johnny's stupidity. Of course, you idiot. Can't you see that's where I'm from? Johnny says, you from there too? Hot dog. Now we're talking the same language. It's a good thing you didn't turn out to be one of them extraterrestrial beings. And Billy goes, is that so? Or is that so? No, it's a question. Is that so? So maybe Billy is extraterrestrial. I mean, he managed to take a cardboard fucking vehicle to the moon with a special fucking liquid. So he may be, maybe Francesco Zappa is not from here. Francesco Zappa has not just been around for hundreds of years. He's a being from another world. So, moving along here. So finally, of course, in the course of encountering Celestia, there's a big spider. So they have to deal with this big spider, and it lives in a cave. There's this cave motif. Frank's always describing a cave in these screenplays, and when he was interviewing the Rolling Stone in '68, he had himself photographed in front of looked like a cave, and it was probably the secret tunnel to Harry Houdini's house from the log cabin. But I'm not sure. But he definitely had Frank presenting himself as a caveman. The cage, okay. So the first grunt, the king opens the cage, which the first grunt didn't know about, and the king says, the cage with the giant spider in it, of course. And then he tells him to push this button, and there's an electrical crackle. And it gives the giant, this electrical crackle gives the giant spider a little electrical shock and makes him mad. Remember, it's usually best to starve the spider for a couple of weeks before using him on Earth people. So the king of grunts wants the spider to eat Johnny, Billy, Cecil, and Larry. But Celestia doesn't want that to happen. So we're moving along, coming close to the end of the script. Another case where Don, Captain Beefheart, he walks along, he looks back over his shoulder occasionally at Sue, his mother. He's also scratching the nerve rash under his neck. The swan, and then Sue comes along and meets the spider, who is crawling on, ready to eat whoever it encounters. So she managed to take a swatter and hits the spider in the eye. And it says the eye, in reality a chicken egg injected with food coloring. The eye is crushed, releasing a quantity of multicolored goo. Now, the spider is identified with the eye. Center margin structures that came in with the printing press. What was it? In box image of the universe, of the solar system, you had the sun, and then that's the center, and then the planets are going around it like they're the margins. So a center margin structure, a visual hierarchy comes in with the eye, and the spider, McLuhan has a picture of the spider in War and Peace and Gold Village as a cartoon image of the Kaiser, either World War I or World War II. This spider is reaching out over Europe. So the spider is a traditional image for visual space. Are you there? Are people getting this? Okay. Yes. So Frank seems to be aware of that. The eye is where you nail if you kick out the eye, then the spider is diminished. So Beefheart's mother smashes the spider's eye, and all is fine. So the Larry and Cecil are not sort of noticed, and they come along, and they eventually beat up and kill the king of the grunts. So everybody is looking good. The Celestia is happy because Billy's paying attention to her. No, actually, when she thought Billy was dead, she jumped on Cecil. So she's hanging out with Cecil, and she's saying, well, maybe she says, they've taken Billy away and killed him, my beloved one. He's gone forever. He was so kind, so tender, so mature. Cecil says, well, maybe he's not dead yet. Maybe he's only hurt a little bit and bleeding. Celestia says, he must be. He must be dead. No man could survive the terrible grunt tortures. He's gone forever. But she stops crying and abruptly lunges on Cecil. But I have you to love me for eternity, the two of us, repopulating the moon. Come with me, you beautiful earthling. Let's all return to the subterranean gardens and consummate our love feast. So, in the celebration of that Billy and Johnny, they can get back to the earth, and Celestia's still alive. The grunt people are dead. She inaugurates an orgy. So it says, Beefheart, whenever he induces himself, I didn't read this, I think I read it last week. I'm Captain Beefheart, and this is my loyal assistant, Sue. I'm magic, and I can make myself invisible and fly through time and space, another dimension, and that's how I got here. So, Beefheart, he goes up to the moon and helps out. Well, that's led to Sue being the person who knocks out the spider's eye. So basically, you got Billy, Cecil, and Larry land on the moon, meet Celestia, and then Johnny shows up. Then they have to deal with the grunt people, have a battle with them, and they win, and then they go and have an orgy. But let's see. Beefheart offers to take a couple of people back with his interdimensional travel. Beefheart says, our work here is done now, and we must be off to my secret mountain retreat to watch over good people everywhere and keep them safe from danger and harm and the forces of evil. And so in parting, may I say this, it's been a real pleasure to save you two fellows, and I know everything is going to work out fine for both of you. And so long for now, fellows, and God bless you. And he dematerializes. Well, Billy and Johnny go join the orgy, and there's one last little interruption. Somebody, is it the king? The king of the grunts? Somebody, but Billy and Johnny are still in trouble, but Johnny pulls out a concealed .45 and he refers to a little reference manual, and he thumbs through the book and reads aloud, simultaneously shooting everything in the room. And Johnny says, it says here in the book, halt or I'll fire. Who goes there? Present arms. I now declare this bridge open. So he's reading some manual for a public ceremony to guide him in shooting whatever's left over in the executioner's room. So Billy and Johnny are, Larry and Cecil have gone off to the orgy, but now, a little later, Billy and Johnny get free. So it says, Johnny closes the book, blows the smoke away from his pistol, puts his arm around Billy, and leads him off screen. We hold for a dissolve on a nearby grunt. Johnny says, come on, old-timer, this sort of thing always tends to upset me. So as the credits are going up, you dissolve to the subterranean gardens. That's the place where Celestia has her orgy. So there's full-blood orgies happening. And it says, the love feast is in full swing. We pan the scene, picking out interesting techniques here and there. We hold on Celestia kissing Cecil's ear as a strange figure passes in front of the camera. We pull back slightly and bring it into focus. It's Captain Beefheart. We zoom in as he winks, and Beefheart beckoning to the audience. Come on, kids. What are you waiting for? So, there it is in 1964. In clean America, Zappa in his movie is inviting the young kids at school to join an orgy. Now, that's pretty radical. That's pretty underground at that point, wouldn't you say? Are you guys muted? I have to wait a second? Or did you lose your bearings? Where are you guys? Oh, yeah. You're blocked, right?
Hello.
Bert?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
I dropped out a long time ago.
But did you have anything to say? Yes, I'm here. Did you have anything to say?
Well, I don't remember anymore, but it's quite funny because today when we were making the video, we were making a video. We saw this Captain Beefheart thing.
What was that? What did we see?
Yeah, there was a light in front of the screen. And
This apparition. Right, this apparition appeared right there on the screen.
Captain Beefheart.
Okay. Now, I'm looking at, did Bill, no, Bert should be here. I guess he just got knocked off and he'll get back on.